So I'm going to talk about some work that we've been doing at the Indian Institute of Science with the Smart Cities mission. The Indian ran out of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And I just found out actually that my colleague, Professor Bharadwaj, talked about some aspects of this morning. So if you find this terribly boring and you feel that you want to walk out and take a break, by all means, I wouldn't feel offended. But I'll try to be a little bit different. I'll maybe give you a little bit more depth, maybe not depth, but a little bit more of a different perspective from a use case point of view. So the idea really here is there's a lot of data around, and sometimes we don't realize that data is being collected about us. But how do you enable this public data? Oh, it's okay, sorry. I'm not sure what I do with this. Oh, this is to advance the thing? Okay. Right, said, okay, good, okay. So how do you enable this public data to be used for public good? That's really the question that we asked ourselves. And what kind of data are we talking about? We're talking about all kinds of data, right? So smart cities are collecting, I don't know if this doesn't do any kind of pointer, does it? Does it do a pointer? No, okay. Smart cities are collecting all kinds of sensor data. So they have air quality monitors, they have traffic sensors, they have water quality sensors. They have waste management sensors. They have all kinds of things. They also have a lot of video data, right? So a lot of video cameras around. All this stuff is sitting over here. Smart homes. You have smart meters. You have instrumentation in industrial centers. You have hospital data. You have e-governance data, things like property records that our colleague just talked about earlier. And then you have a whole lot of historical archival data that might be sitting somewhere in some dusty old files. So there's all this data sitting around. And if you as an application developer, or you as a researcher, or you even as a government employee in a particular department, you want to go and get access to this data, you have absolutely no idea how to do it. There may be some subset of it that is owned by your department that you may have access to, but the rest of it is a mystery. It's sitting somewhere, somebody has control over it, you don't even know who to call to get access to it. Even if you did get access to it, the question is, how do you use it? I mean, what is the data schema? What is the format of this data? And people are very possessive about data. Right? I mean, I've spent some time talking to a lot of people in smart cities around the country, and the attitude is, oh, I spent all this time collecting this data. This is mine. Why should I give it to you? There's no sense that this is public data. This is data that you may have collected, but you don't necessarily have the right to hoard. So that's one issue. How do you even know what there is? Then, of course, there's the data. Even if you did know how to use it, it's coming from different sources. Even if it's the same kind of data, right? If it's data from, say, air quality meters, there may be 3 or 4 different vendors. Each vendor has got different schemas, is representing the data in different ways, is maybe collecting slightly different types of data. And how do you put it all together? How do you understand, if you're trying to put all the data together in some unified way, right, across the city, and the different parts of the city are measured differently, how do you represent all this data in some common, consistent way that is meaningful to someone who's looking at it? And then, of course, not to forget the issues of privacy and security, right? I mean, I talked about public data, but some public data is about individuals. And you want to make sure that when you exchange that data, you are very careful to preserve individual privacy. I mean, it's an absolutely critical issue, especially with all the issues with Aadhaar that we have seen recently. So that's kind of the background. And what I'll do is, maybe just talk about a little bit a use case, and then I'll talk a little bit about the solution that we have created. Right? This is a women's safety use case that we're actually working on right now. And the problem statement is that a city commissioner, and I wouldn't mention the name of the city because it's not public yet, but this is a real city, a real very big city. The city commissioner wants to improve the women's safety within the city. And as you, I'm sure, know, there are a lot of initiatives going on, driven by the central government. There's something called the Nirbhaya initiative, which is trying to create, a lot of women's safety-related data in a lot of the major cities. The problem with a lot of that data is it's not real time. It's not fine-grained. It kind of gives you rough ideas about localities and regions. It doesn't give you very precise location. On the other hand, there is a lot of data that can give you very, very precise information. So, for example, police. If you look at what's under there on the data sources, police have data they have information about historical crime data. Right? They know where crimes have occurred. The pattern of crimes, the types of crimes. Very often they don't share that data with anybody, right? They also know where police are going to be patrolling, right? They know real time. Where is a policeman right now, right? In many cases. There's a lot of smart infrastructure. So a lot of cities are putting in smart poles, right? So they have centers where you can ring, you can press alarms, you can talk to somebody. There's a video connection. So these smart poles are distributed around cities. You have streetlight data, information about real time about streetlights. You also have private data. So Airtel and Jio and others have information about cell phone usage. Right? The number of cell phone users that are connected to every single base station. This is data that's available. And you could easily anonymize this data and then get a very good idea of, in real time, where the population is distributed in a particular city. And the question is, can you somehow use that data? This is private data. It's owned by a private company. But they may be willing to share if it's for public good. Can you use that data and improve women's safety? There are traffic sensors that tell you the density of traffic. There's property records that say which properties are occupied and which properties are empty. So is there an empty lot somewhere? So using all this information, right? So this is, all valuable information. If you put it all together, you had access to all of it, you could create an extremely accurate, street-by-street, real-time record of a real-time indicator of where it might be safe and where it might not be safe, right, for a woman to walk around. And obviously this is not exact, and you might have issues, and if you, for example, said something is not safe and a business lost its some money as a consequence, this might be a concern. So there are lots of implications in terms of publishing this kind of data, but this is data that could be real public good. The problem is that there's no way the city commissioner has of obtaining this data and putting it all together and creating such a real-time heat map about safety of women's safety within his city. So that's where we are trying to create a solution to offer, which is we're trying to create this thing called a data exchange platform. It's called the India Urban Data Exchange, IUDX, right? Which will essentially mediate access to data. So it'll sit there in the middle. You'll have applications and analytics and you know, data visualization, all of that running on top of the app, top of the platform. And then below, you'll have all kinds of different sources of data, as I've shown over here, and of course, many more as well. And what this will do is it'll provide a common way of searching for data. So in a very consistent way, you can get a catalog of all the data that's available, which is a huge, huge benefit, right? You can understand not just what data is available, but what format the data is in, how it's represented. And more than that, you can also request access to the data. And in some cases, the data might be readily accessible because it's freely available. In some cases, it might be something that you have to pay for, and that might be, you know, also a transaction that you can conduct over the system. But the idea is that it'll happen almost in real time. So an application developer, a startup, right? You want to create an application, a new parking application, right? That I don't know, smartly understands where traffic is and figures out, you know, the best places to park or something like that. You don't have to go and request 100 different, you know, parts of the city to get access to the data. You can go to one place, IUDX, register as an IUDX user, and then interact with IUDX and find out what data is available that's relevant to you, request access to it. If there's some transaction fee that's required, pay the transaction fee, subscribe to a particular data source, and within a few hours be set up to actually write your application. So that's the vision that we have. So it's actually part of a broader effort. So the data exchange is one aspect of it, but there's a bunch of cultural changes that are required around that to make the data exchange useful, right? So you need a policy of open data. People cannot hoard their data. They have to understand that this data is something that is, you know, should be made available. They can place restrictions on the data. They can even charge for the data, but they must make it available. And so the whole idea is really creating a policy and cultural transformation beyond just a technology insertion. I'm going to skip all this since it says I'm out of time. We are starting on this project. There's a lot of work that's already been done. We are in the process of building the first version of the system and doing a pilot deployment within a large city. But we are actively looking for collaborators and partners, both large companies, many large companies, many of you are presented in this room as well, who are already engaged with us and working with us closely. We also have a lot of startups that are working with us. And we're creating something called a Startup Council that is around this India Urban Data Exchange. And so we are soliciting people who are interested to come and work with us. And if you are, you can either send me email or you can go to our website, actually. That's probably the better place to go, iudx.org.in. You know, it'll give you information there on how to get in touch and hopefully help contribute to the project and hopefully benefit from the project as well. Thank you.